the orbit. The declination is another matter altogether. The declination is the distance between true north, geographic north, and magnetic north. Oh, well, that can't change very much. And he sighs and puts on, is going to have to dumb this down a little bit to explain it to someone who is obviously so ignorant. No, the declination changes all the time. You didn't think the Earth was just one solid mass, did you? You do know about the tectonic plates. Yes, I know that. He said, well, when they shift, when there's an earthquake or a volcanic eruption or any kind of other disturbance, that changes, not to mention that the Earth wobbles. And it wobbles, it's wobbled 17 meters in the last couple of years. And we don't feel that in our normal daily life. But if you're trying to navigate or you're running a GPS system or you're a satellite, you need to know that. So the declination is the difference between geologic and magnetic Earth. And it has to be calculated over and over all the time because it needs to be very precise. Huh, I didn't know that. Thank you for telling me that. What day is it? I say, oh, it's Tuesday. It's still Tuesday. That's the end of that story.
It's wonderful. Oh.
Thanks. That's a wonderful
That was a
writing.
wonderful story. Yeah, that was
Good.
like
Yeah.
how someone's mind can still be so
Yes.
incredibly insightful and in other ways not. That's amazing, Sharon, and terrifying.
It is. Aging is a frightening thing to watch and even more frightening to participate in.
Yeah.
You'll find that when you get to your own decrepitude with me.
I'm finding it every day. I find something new.
That
So,
was just beautiful, heartbreaking, but beautiful. Thank you.
I agree. That was really extraordinary. Well told. You may have heard that I started recording. I heard a robotic voice, which I've never heard before, announce that. So we are recording this event. And once again, since it is the recording, I'll say this is the July edition of the Do Tell Story Swap. And we just heard a wonderful story from Sharon Elwell. Next on our list of tellers for tonight is Ed. And so let me find Ed. There you are. And Ed, you've been a very busy bee these days. I know there's been a lot of events you've been hosting and participating, and maybe you can just tell us one or two things that you've been up to and then start your story out. Thank you for volunteering tonight.
Okay, thank you. The next event we have with the Storytelling Association of California is the Genre Storytelling event, which is our monthly event. And we started it last August and we went all the way through July 21st from 7 to 8:30. We will have 7 storytellers from different swap groups and a couple of our board members will be sharing stories, humorous stories. And then we're going to start the entire cycle over. And the change we made was that we've been taking donations and giving them to the tellers. We'll still accept donations, but we are, from when we start our new round again with personal stories in August, we are going to pay all the tellers $50. Just everybody a flat amount because it's ranged from 35 to 55. So we're going to do that. We decided as a board that for most events, we want to pay all our tellers. So we're moving in that direction. My big news is that I had hip replacement surgery June 14th, and I've had a lot of time to sit around and get involved with everything. So I'm feeling well. I've had a good recovery, so I'm doing fine. All right. 10 years ago, I found true love for the 50th time. It was love at first sight. We just had so much in common. We loved going to live theater. We enjoyed storytelling events. And of course, our favorite thing was eating a variety of the world's foods at all the restaurants we could find. And of course, adventure traveling. Our first trip we took together was to Aspen, Colorado, to visit her sister, who was closing her beloved Japanese restaurant after 31 years. And it was the last night. There was a feast, family was over, 8 of us gathered, and we had the most delicious sushi, Atlantic char salmon, great desserts. I mean, it was a feast, and it cost $1,200, but it was on the house. We left the waiters a really good tip, though. My favorite part, though, was meeting her niece, Chloe. Chloe was married to a South African man, and together they own 5 safari resorts all throughout Africa. And she told us all about these resorts and invited us to come for free. The one she said we should go to is where the Great Migration starts. And some of you may have heard about this, seen National Geographic shows, but the Great Migration is when, right after the birthing season in the southern part in Tanzania, they go 1,200 miles up into Kenya following water sources and food sources. I looked up some of the facts, and there are 1.5 million wildebeest on this journey, 5,000 elephants, 8,000 giraffes, cheetahs, leopards, just unbelievable amounts of animal life, and with their babies, because they're traveling this 1,200 mile. The one part that you may have seen is when they have to cross, it's usually the wildebeest on National Geographic, they have to cross the Katuma River, and that's where those 20-foot long alligators are waiting for them. And it's quite a sight. It's pretty dramatic and horrific, but it's an amazing trip. Well, 6 months later, we were on a plane heading to her resort, and it was right on the edge of the Serengeti National Park, which is a World Heritage Site. For 4 days, we went out in this Jeep, and it had this part up on top that they could rise, and you could stand up there and look all across the savannah. And my favorite thing was seeing this cheetah run down an antelope, and it was going about 70 miles an hour and brought the kill back to their babies. There were giraffes that would look down on us. We felt totally safe. The guides were local people that lived on the savannah and in that national park, on the edge of that national park. The 5th day, though, was going to be the real adventure. We went out in the Jeep early in the morning, and we, just took lots of really great pictures, but then we came to the Katuma River, close to it, but we couldn't drive right through that river. We had to park the Jeep and walk about 1/4 of a mile through the jungle, get down to a raised platform that was safe from those huge alligators that were feasting on the animals that had to cross that river. The guide said, it's safe if you follow what I tell you. Number 1, keep together. Number 2, if a predator does happen to come on our path through this jungle, freeze. Don't look at the animal, because if you look in the eyes, they'll see it as a challenge. And whatever you do, don't run. Just stay perfectly still, look down, make yourself as big as you can, but don't look at that animal. Please, please. Just nothing's going to happen. Don't worry. Nothing ever has happened. No problem. We get into the jungle, and all of us were totally mesmerized because up in the canopies, it was like a highway for monkeys and bird life, the most colorful bird life, and all these monkeys, and the sounds were just deafening. And pictures, we were just taking pictures like crazy, and I was mesmerized. And I was following this one pack of monkeys as they were just moving along through the canopy. And I don't know, I took hundreds of pictures, I think. And then all of a sudden, I looked and I realized I'm by myself. The rest of the crowd has made it through the jungle part, and I can hear them. They're down by the river and they're going, ooh, ah. So I take off running. I get through there as fast as I can. I take off running. And then the magic happened. This beautiful little baby elephant came right across the path, stopped and looked at me. Well, it was a baby elephant. I wasn't worried about it charging me. So I just started taking pictures. I moved around, took pictures until in my viewfinder, the baby elephant disappeared and all I saw was gray. I looked up into the eyes. I was not about 50 feet away though. A big mama elephant. She's looking at me and moving that trunk up and down, and her foot starting to paw the ground. And I tried to remember all those things that he told me, but I was staring right at the eyes of this elephant. And since I hadn't followed the directions anyway, I turned and I ran as fast as I could, and I am heading back to that Jeep. Now, some of you know me, I'm a little chunky guy, and I'm not the fastest, but I'll tell you what, I probably set an Olympic speed record running from that elephant. However, it was closing in on me, and there was no way I was going to make the Jeep. So, I don't know if you ever really felt fear, your adrenaline just pumped. And this baobab tree was right in front of me, and I leaped up and I got up 4 branches. But I knew that wasn't going to be enough, and the elephant was still coming. I pulled up 2 more branches and then another branch, and maybe I'm up high enough. And I feel this trunk touch my tennis shoe. I pull up 1 more, and then I feel that trunk wrap around my leg, and it starts pulling me down, down. It's pulling me, just like I've been pulling your leg this entire story.
Oh,
Or most of the story.
Ed, you wicked, wicked man. Oh my goodness. I was thinking maybe that was how you needed hip replacement.
Well, everything is true except actually getting to the resort. Although we want to do it in the future. She still has those resorts. So everything else is true up to that.
You mean the fancy dinner?
Fancy dinner, meeting Chloe. And,
oh, well, that's nice. Oh, well. Anyway, that was you took us for a ride there.
Yeah.
Oh, that was great. And what a contrast from the first story. I mean, that's what's so amazing about our swaps. So Katie, if I'm not mistaken, I think Vicky might be
Vicky,
next. Does that seem right?
Yes.
So I'm going to look for, oh, Vicky's right here. So please welcome Vicky to our Do Tell stage.
There. I managed to find some stories that I used to tell stories maybe 30 years ago, and I've managed to find some stories from then. So I thought I would tell one from that time period. Ina hated the way Mrs. Grouper looked at her through the glass, through the goldfish bowl, swimming very carefully trailing her fins that were iridescent aquamarine, lavender, and black. She was a beautiful goldfish of pinks and oranges, sunset colors. And Mrs. Grouper would slowly glide by the side of the goldfish bowl and look at her with a very intelligent but entirely dispassionate look and keep going. Well, Ina, being 15 years old and working on the estate just part-time, Saturdays for 2 years, figured that Mrs. Grouper really, there wasn't too much interesting to see in a 15-year-old, but she tapped on the glass and smiled every time. And every time Mrs. Grouper drifted by almost like a parade float, watching and disappearing into all the greenery in the aquarium, swimming by the ceramic octopus with the arms that rised up like a benevolent aunt waving goodbye, and the little guy in his suit bubbling up songs out of his little bubble thing. Well, the truth was Ina was kind of lonely because it was just her in this estate, doing her cleaning, doing everything that needed to be done, except for one other maid, the dour Louise. Louise had been with the family for 30 years. And Louise remembered Mrs. Grouper when she was actually a very beautiful woman, and elegant and always beautifully dressed. And then Mr. Grouper, the very wealthy, very handsome Mr. Grouper, died. And Mrs. Grouper became quieter, colder, maybe more reptilian, until finally she just morphed entirely into a fish. And there she was in her goldfish bowl. The family had taken care of Louise and given her part of the inheritance and had paid for her so long as she took care of Mrs. Grouper. And the dour Louise, in her black uniform, her starched white, blindingly white apron, her hair pulled back violently into a glossy, tight fist. The dour Louise took very good care of her mistress. But the dour Louise was not up for nuances or giggling or anything that required a smile, a comment. Nope, not going to happen. So that left Ina pretty much to walk around the estate and the house by herself, cleaning as she went. And there she found a photo, and sure enough, there was Mr. Grouper standing tall and elegant with his hair like a black cliff off to the side, as was the style then, and a very thin pencil mustache, a cigarette in his hand. And in front of him, slouching kind of languidly, was Mrs. Grouper. In her blonde hair, a tiny tiara, and a spill of aquamarine satin. He looked right at the camera. She, on the other hand, had a smile maybe of a bemused aunt looking down at a niece, off camera, off to the side. And Ina always thought that she would probably have liked Mrs. Grouper had she known her when she was a human. And there on a shelf under the photo was the little tiara, little tiara. And when Ina was certain that the dour Louise was somewhere other than nearby, she would put the thing on and she would run and look at herself in the mirror. And it made her feel pretty special until she'd hear a clump or a wheeze or a vacuum cleaner, and then it would go right back onto the shelf perfectly, because the dour Louise would notice if it was not symmetrically on its little shelf. Well, it so happens that Mrs. Grouper expected to be moved regularly throughout the day. So her mornings were spent in her goldfish bowl, but at lunchtime, the dour Louise would take her to the greenhouse and very carefully spill her into the koi pond. The koi pond had huge koi in blacks and silvers and tobacco browns that shone like copper, and splotches of imperial red. And oh, Mrs. Grouper would shimmy and shake and dart off this way and dart off that way. It was hard to see who was chasing who between the carp and Mrs. Grouper. And this was where Ina would hang out, because it turns out that the dour, ever so dour Louise could not stand the vapors of the greenhouse. And that's how Ina got her job on Saturdays to begin with. So she would go and clip off the old orchid blossoms that were withering and clip back some leaves and water everything, but the whole time watching the koi pond as it splashed and roared with activity. Late afternoon, the dour Louise would rescue Mrs. Grouper and put her into the most spectacular crystal punch bowl. It was Mrs. Grouper's favorite when she was a human. It was huge and it was multifaceted, and it sat right in the middle of a table, a mahogany table that was polished to within an inch of its life. And in late afternoon, the light would come through in big bands and send shards of iridescent rainbow all over the room. The colors would sparkle and move everywhere she swam. And oh, it was spectacular. And to Ina, this was probably Mrs. Grouper's favorite time, because she watched her all alone in this beautiful bowl, swimming and swaying, almost rhythmically. And to Ina's eyes, she looked like a beautiful young woman in a new gown in a ballroom, all by herself, dancing to music nobody could hear. It was so graceful and so romantic, and she was so beautiful. And the colors shone off like jewels, topazes, salmons, and deep, rich purples. And the whole room came alive in colors. And above, the reflection from the water created a mirage, a shifting mirage of water. Well, come nighttime, in comes Louise with the bowl, a big black ceramic bowl in the shape of a cat's head. The few times that Louise deemed okay to talk to Ina, she mentioned that this had been a Halloween treat bowl from Mrs. Grouper's childhood, and that Mrs. Grouper had loved it. And not only that, she said, as she would place the giant ceramic cat head on the kitchen counter with Mrs. Grouper inside, as she very gently covered the top with a little tiny bit of fabric, she said, really, she can't sleep anywhere else. So Ina would peer under the cheesecloth and look, and sure enough, it was dark and silent, no movement at all. Well, once again, it was the end of the day, and once again, Ina was ready to go. So she found little things to do until it was finally 5 o'clock. And she poked her head in and said, bye. Silence. The dour Louise was doing something that had nothing to do with saying goodbye. So out the door she flew, and down the street, away from the high-end houses, down to the neighborhoods she went. She was thinking to herself, ick, ooh, turning into a fish. What a disgusting thing. I would hate that. And then she started thinking about what the dour Louise might turn into. And all she could think was maybe a mailbox, something stuck deep in the ground. It even looked like a frown. Well, she kept walking, thinking these thoughts. And the closer she got to a certain car, she looked, and sure enough, there it was, Franklin. Franklin was polishing his car and polishing his car and polishing his car because, as Ina knew, he had a crush on her. And he waited for her to come by every Saturday at this time, and sure enough, here she comes. And he suddenly looked up and, oh, hi, he said, way too loud. Hi, he said again, trying to make it a little more spontaneous. Tonight, 8 o'clock? Ina smiled, her most adult smile, and said yes, and kept walking. Well, when she got out of sight, she turned this beautiful pink and she smiled from ear to ear, and she was glowing with dreams and a wild confetti of ideas and thoughts and love and dreams, and all kinds of things swirled around her. And oh, her mind and her heart just expanded until finally she just burst out of it and flew up into the sky, a glossy black raven on wings that could take her anywhere. Up into the sky she flew, closer and closer to a big, round, white, indifferent moon floating in the early evening sky. But past that she went, and she kept flying until she got into the darkest, darkest of nights, straight to the brilliance of the stars.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
Story.
Just take a minute to absorb that. What an amazing blend of realism and fantasy that was. I mean, your descriptions, like hair pulled violently back into a fist. That was really, really beautiful descriptions and visuals. Now, Vicky, you had said that you create your own stories, right? Yeah. And I think I said the same time last time that there's something very mythical about them,
Mm.
really powerful. So
I liked, when I saw that one again, I liked how people start envisioning who they will become long before they realize they're doing so.
Mhm.
interesting. Well, thank you for your story. And we still have a few, thank goodness. I noticed that Vina has joined us. Everybody welcome Vina. Hello, Vina.
Hello, sorry to be late.
No, that's all right.
Okay.
We're glad you're here. And so our next teller, please welcome Pat. Pat's iPad. Um, good to have you, Pat. Pat, I'm afraid, I think you're muted again.
Now, can you hear me?
Yes, very
Okay.
good. Thank you.
Okay. I want to tell you about how my whole career started. In 1949, when I was 5 years old, we lived in Napa, California, where I still live. And we lived across the main street of town, which was Jefferson, that had railroad tracks down the middle. And you had to cross that and walk another 4 blocks or so to Lincoln Elementary School. Lincoln Elementary School was a huge old building with all brick, and it was very wide. It had 2 stories, but the stories were huge, so it looked much bigger than a 2-story building. And there were steps in the center in the front and steps at the end. And the 2 kindergartens were at the end, just inside the doors up the 6 or 8 stairs. So my mother and a neighbor would walk me and my friend Janice, and we'd walk the blocks, and my little brother came along. And so the first day of school, I had not been in the room before, not like today when children get to meet the teacher and all that. But my mother said I entered that door and I never looked back. I didn't care where she was and what she was doing. When you looked across the room, you were looking out the front windows of the building, and the windows were almost up to the 2nd story and down to about 2 or 3 feet above the floor. So windows everywhere and cubbies with toys and bricks and all kinds of things to play with. To the right, as you walked in, the wall that went to the next room was divided. It had a doorway here and a doorway at the end. And behind that wall was a coat closet where you hung all your things. And then in front of that, I don't believe we ever had a blackboard. I don't remember that, but there was an old upright piano. In those days, you had to sing and play the piano to be a kindergarten teacher. So, oh, I love that woman. Her name was Mrs. Hotelling. And her daughter was in the class with us. And we probably had 25 children. So every day we sang songs, we sat on the carpet. I don't think there were even little tables we had graham crackers and juice every day. Oh, it was real exciting. And an art project almost every day. So, but and of course the little group being little, I didn't know. I thought everybody was just like me and loved to be there. Some were a little afraid. And then we had strange things happen. One day there was an art project on the table behind the piano, and Mrs. Hotelling would say, okay, you when you come here. And it always involved cutting something and gluing something. And it was the old paste that's hard that comes in a jar. So what you had to do was get a little piece of paper towel. She would give you some paste and you'd go finish your project. Well, I don't know why I happened to be there. Maybe it was my turn too. I was just standing there, but we had this little guy in our class. His name was Eddie Thompson. He had red hair. He was really cute. She put his paste on his towel and he stood behind the piano and he ate it. And then he went back and asked for some more. So, and we didn't know the difference. We didn't eat it, but he did. And so it was only probably 2 hours of kindergarten those days. My mom would come to get me, we'd walk home. And she told me that every day she'd say, what did you do? And I would tell her verbatim, everything the teacher said, everything we did. I just loved it, as opposed to my younger brother who went later and he'd say, we had fun. We went outside today. So like I said, we would sing songs. And the other, so as time went by, I really liked her and I liked to spend as much time with her as possible. My mother had a job in Knoxville, just north of Napa. And for some reason, one day she couldn't get there. She had made an agreement with the teacher. Could she please keep me about 20 minutes, half an hour? And so everybody went home and I was still there and I was real happy to be there. You know, and for a little person sitting on the floor, the top of the upright piano was very high. There was something up there. And she gave me a microphone. And so I told the three bears, no, Goldilocks and three bears. And then I sang Jingle Bells. And one was on one side of the record and one was on the other side. And she gave me the record and it was like a little 45. And we had it for years, but I think it melted in the garage when I was about 10 years old. I don't know. Anyway, but sometime during that time, probably more than once, I told my mother, when I grow up, I'm going to be a kindergarten teacher too. She says, well, so I went through school and I went to college and I did get my credential. And the first 2 years I taught, I had to teach, it was a 3-4 combination, then a third grade. And then finally my third year of kindergarten was open and I was able to start that. And that was just the best thing ever because they're so excited. They're so willing to learn. Once in a while you get someone who's really worried about being there, but very seldom. And they always want to tell you everything. And so the first week, the first few days, we had a big circle every morning to take roll. And then we'd ask someone to tell us something. And so every day, a fifth of the children would do show and tell. And some were real shy. Some would tell you all about their family, their dog, whatever. So we had an interesting one day. One little girl said, this summer, my mom and dad took me to Australia to see my aunt and uncle. And that was true. The parents had told me that. Well, then we had Russell, who always did everything everybody else did. Russell said, me too. We went to Australia. And I said, you did? Yeah. He said, yeah, we went in our motorhome. Well, so then it was time to sit down to do math. And they all had tables facing the front board. So they all sat down. And I'm in the middle of putting numbers on the board. And Russell stands up and he says, well, maybe it was San Anselmo. So anyway, we always had days like that. So I just like to tell you a few of the things that made me so happy to be a teacher. Later on, when I had kindergarten, sometimes I had a partner. And so we taught our own class with help from them. And then we shared with them, we helped them. But at one time, we didn't have that many kindergartens in my school. And so I taught in the mornings. And in the afternoon, I gave an hour to another teacher or another program or whatever. So, but then at one point, my principal allowed me to bring some kids in early and the other half an hour later. So the younger ones who maybe had not had preschool, they came early so I could do extra with them that the older one didn't need. So one day, the young ones had gone home and the older ones were still left. And there were only 6 or 8 of them and they sat around a kidney-shaped table. And so in the spring, by January, they were supposed to be able to write a full sentence. And by the end of kindergarten, a paragraph and so on anyway. So we were working on that. And these little ones could do it really well. So I would give them a subject and then I'd let them be on their own. And I was just a few feet away from them filing papers from the morning. So these 2 little girls were best friends and they were sitting there at the table. And one of them said to the other, before she started to write her story, she said, yesterday I said a bad word and my mama heard me. And the other one said, you mean you said something inappropriate? And the other one said yes, but I'm sure she didn't know what that meant. And so they looked at each other, and the one who had said, you said something inappropriate, she says, it's okay. Your mama still loves you. She said, yeah, I know. And then they drew their pictures and wrote their stories. So, but that's the fun of teaching, and particularly little guys. Everything that they learn to do, they say, oh, look, it gets so excited. That's their big discovery for the day. And so I did that for 35 years. And the thing I miss the most is those little faces I've done since then. I've done some storytelling at preschools and schools, and so you'll all like this since you're all storytellers. One day I was at a school and they brought me one grade level at a time, the first grade, second grade, third grade. So third grade's turn there, and I always keep my list on a table next to me. So I had told the story and I was looking at my list to pick what was next. And this little person in front of the row says, don't you have any books? I said, no, I just tell. And he looked at me like, what? So anyway, but I love teaching and I love storytelling. And so anyway, I'm good to be back with all of you. I miss you. So that's it.
Oh, thank you.
That was beautiful, Pat. Now, did you have to know the piano and be able to
Oh.
sing too?
I lucked out when I went through state college. At that point, they said, yes, we would have to be able to play piano. So in the music building, there was a tiny skinny room, like a long closet, had a upright piano, and you had to learn. We had to learn Hickory Dickory Dock, or no, sorry. Anyway, whatever it was, and play the piano at the same time. Oh, it was horrible. It was just terror. Anyway, so after I took that class, then I took another one that was set up for elementary, and she taught us, if we wanted to, how to use an auto harp or how to use music, recording music with kids. We went, hallelujah, because it no longer was a state requirement. Yeah. So
Thank God.
yeah,
I would never have
exactly.
become a teacher.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you for your story. Sounds like you had some characters in your show and tell.
Oh, there were many. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Jan and Sol.
I'll give one tiny more one in the third grade where they're older, and I had them first. They're very naive. So we have show and tell, and there's this little blonde girl. She had two sisters. So she gets up for show and tell. She says, on Saturdays, when my daddy won't get out of bed, mom lets us all get under the bed and kick the mattress till he gets up. And she says, and you know what? My mom had dyed her hair. It was supposed to be yellow, but it was purple. So we get all this family business. So anyway,
Well,
things
thank
to be
you.
happy about.
Thank you so much for your story. And currently we have one last name on our roster. I'm sure we'll get a few during break, but I think we should go straight to Genevieve. Let's see, let me find you. There you are. It's so wonderful to have you. And please, everyone, welcome Genevieve to
Yeah.
our stage.
Hi.
Hi, good to be back. It's Friday morning. My mini Sheltie pup sits at attention by the front door. His eyes are bright. His plumed tail is swishing across the floor in anticipation. He looks button-busting proud as I slip his little vest, teal-colored, over his back and clip on it the tag that identifies him as Chipper, Pause for Healing, Certified Companion Dog. We're on our way to the hospital where we have been doing this service for a number of months. I myself had been a chaplain in different roles over the past 10 years. I was a law enforcement chaplain for 5 years, and then I volunteered at Sutter. And then I became a spiritual care volunteer at Kaiser. So you learn a lot of things. You learn to be still. You learn to listen. You learn to be present. But nothing taught me the power of love and of being the way that Chipper taught me. Going to his service as a Pause for Healing volunteer was Chipper's favorite activity. You didn't need to give him treats. He just wanted to be there. He was the favorite of the staff who always would nuzzle him and sometimes pull a treat out of their scrubs. And then we would be on our way. 4th floor, 3rd floor, 2nd floor. Our favorite was the emergency room. When I first heard that we could do service in the emergency room, it seemed very strange to me. What could we do with these people who are just there kind of in a very strange circumstance? But I soon found out. This is a place where people normally are expecting to have a regular day, and all of a sudden it's turned upside down in critical circumstances. And on top of that, half the time they're made to wait. So I'd like to tell you a typical day at the emergency room with Chipper certified Pause for Healing therapy dog. We hear a wailing sound. It is a man's voice piercing throughout the department. And I hear a nurse telling him, "You must be quiet, you're frightening the children." And he wailed and wailed and wailed. I approach with Chipper and she says, "Yes, come in." As I search, says the nurse, for a sedative. So Chipper and I come in. This happens to be a young man in tremendous pain, out of control for the first time perhaps in his life, and a Spanish speaker. Good news, I speak Spanish, but I don't have to say a word. Instead, I bring Chipper up and nuzzle him between the man's arm and his chest. The man says to me in Spanish, "I love puppies. Me encantan los perritos. Me gustan los perritos. Ay, perrito, little dog. I love little dogs." And in the process, he has forgotten about his pain. And the nurse has given him his sedative. So he says, "Me encantan los perritos." And drops off to sleep. We continue on our rounds and go to an area which is the section of great sadness, the place where there are guards to monitor the patients because they are in a mental health crisis, lest they harm themselves or harm other people. A guard stands by the door of each patient there. The patients changed into distinctive hospital clothing so they can be readily identified. We walk into a dark room, and on the stiff bench is a shadowy figure, languid, sadness, the portrait of what is the purpose of living. I ask permission to walk in. I get a very slight and we walk in with Chipper. Would you like to be with Chipper for a while? Before you know it, all three of us are on the floor. And the young girl is petting Chipper, feeling the pulse of his little beating heart through his soft fur. Calm, calm. Chipper nuzzles up to the chin of this little young girl, teenager. And she says, "Before now, I had nothing to live for. But if I can take care of sweet beings like Chipper, then I have hope." We spent an hour on the floor, saying very little else. Chipper took care of it. Every time I leave a room, I turn to Chipper and quietly scratch his little head and say, "Good boy, Chipper." So he gets his second good boy of the day. We go to the other wing of the emergency room where the pediatric emergency nurse calls me out. She has met Chipper before. She said, please, can you come in? In the room is a little 4-year-old oncology patient. She is burrowing against the wall, trying to go through to the other side if possible. They need to get her vitals because she needs to be transferred to the children's hospital across the bay. But she will not let anyone but her mother touch her. So I visit with Chipper. Her eyes light up. She said, oh, puppy. I say, yes. I asked the nurse, do you think that we could borrow your blood pressure cuff? And the nurse says, yes. Blood pressure is one of the vitals that they have to take. So Chipper allows the blood pressure cuff to be put on his little paw. And before you know it, the nurse can put the cuff on the little girl. The little girl turns to Chipper and says, roll over. And Chipper complies. Before long, she's on her way to Children's Hospital. And we are on our way home. After a little bit of sniffing around the garden, we drive home. I take his little teal vest off and we wait for the next Friday. However, that was March 13th. And Sonoma County shut down for the COVID virus 4 days later. March 20th, next Friday, no more visits. Chipper would sit with his little paw up, looking at me like saying, time to go. Sorry, Chipper, we can't. 1 week passes, a month passes, 2 months pass. Nothing. Finally, I get a call. Pause for healing is not allowed, but you can resume your spiritual care by making telephone calls to our patients. How will I do this? I'm used to having my presence, my eyes, my voice. That je ne sais quoi it is of being with another human being. And I look down at Chipper. He looks up at me like, you got this, Jen. I think, take a lesson from this little creature that has been able to do so much simply by being his sweet, warm self. Eventually, I'm able to communicate through a phone, no visuals, even with the oxygen sounds of oxygen pumping and people grasping for breath. I find that I can be there. I discover through the experiences of a young man who's afraid of getting well because he has no place to go on the streets. Or the experience of another father who is berating himself for having brought COVID home to his wife and 2 young children, even though he didn't realize that the partner that he drove a delivery truck with had COVID. And also I meet the young woman who is waiting, unable to come up to the room where her father is, having been disconnected from the respiratory aids, nothing more to be done, counting the minutes for his last breath. But I discover something. Love speaks through silence. Hope rises in stillness, and understanding comes through being. Soon, we may make it back. 4 little paws will be sauntering through the emergency room, perhaps. But I think that Chipper has taught me some indelible, invaluable, eternal lessons. I look at Chipper, and he looks at me and says, good job, Jen.
Yeah. Good for you. Yeah.
Can you repeat the lesson? Love speaks in silence.
Well, I'll read you how I originally wrote it was, let love speak through your silence. Let hope rise through your stillness. let understanding come through your being.
Wow. What beautiful words. And it's so supported by the story and by Chipper with the pulse of his little beating heart through his soft fur. It's so beautiful, Genevieve.
Thank you.
What a great story to end on before our break. So we usually take about 5 minutes. We can take until about 8:05 and come back and we can have some announcements and maybe do our circle this time. I believe we have a prompt left over from last time where we get to introduce ourselves and meet each other, and that's always been fun and it works pretty well on Zoom. So let's take a 5-minute break, or actually maybe around 7 minutes, and we will regroup at 8:05, everybody. And you're welcome to chat even now. Of course, the Zoom room remains open. I'll put it in gallery view. So you can use the restroom, get a drink, or message people, whatever you like to do. And we'll start up in 7 minutes or so.
Good stories.
To get the, what do we have to do to get the information about the NSN one? You're going to tell us that, right?
Yeah.
In the
I'll,
chat if you guys like.
in the announcements, I'll show you the
Okay.
website for
Okay.
the conference,
Okay,
which is, I think it starts on, there's some events on Wednesday next week, but most of them are Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Welcome back. And I hope you had a chance to think about the wonderful stories that we've had so far tonight. They've been, I heard somebody say, not many, but they're all gems. I think that's
Great stories.
I think that's well put and very apt. They've been really wonderful. Very good. So this is the part of our evening where we get to introduce ourselves and say something about ourselves. We like to try to keep it short. That never seems to work in a room full of storytellers, does it? The wrong group to try to be concise and brief with. But let's do our best. And the prompt, this is left over from June, and it was in anticipation of hot days in the summer. And for some of us, that's more relevant than others. We've been enjoying some cooler weather here in Sonoma County, but I think we might be one of the only ones because the whole West Coast is really, really hot. I'm sure Ed is getting some of that hot weather in Sacramento. But when it's your turn, please tell us who you are and where you live, but say what your favorite summer food is. And so I'll begin by saying, I'm Brandon. I live in Santa Rosa. And when I think of summer meals, it's hard for me not to think of fried catfish with cucumbers and sliced tomatoes from my grandmother's garden. That really is summer for me, those foods served together, preferably next to a beautiful green river. One of my favorite things about summer. So I'm going to pass it over to Katie, and she will introduce herself and tell us her favorite summer food.
I am Katie Mangan and I live in Santa Rosa. And I think my favorite summer food is stone fruit. It's the peaches and things like that. Just so juicy and gorgeous. Yeah.
Very good. So next on my list, I have Meg. So,
Hi, everyone. I'm Meg Brown. I live in Forestville. And, the summer is a time when you can really love vegetables. And so it's hard for me to choose between tomatoes and corn and green beans. But all of those three things, I think I'll just choose. Yeah, vegetables in the summer are the bomb.
I agree. It's no good saying next we have Elaine and then Elaine has to say what her name is.
What's my name? Oh, yes.
But Elaine?
I'm Elaine. I live in Santa Rosa, and it's hard to pick a favorite food. I love barbecues, which is what we have in the summertime, but mostly I just love cold and sweet watermelon. Oh, it's one time you can get all you can eat.
Yeah.
That and cherries. Those are my two favorites. Okay.
And it's nice to have Elaine, who is one of the original founders of the swap. And we're lucky to have with her the other founder of the swap, Kenneth and Patricia.
Yeah. So what's your
Well, I'll start off and then I'll let Patricia. I'm Kenneth Foster, and we live in Chickamauga, Georgia. Try and say that fast 10 times. And I think my favorite summer food is corn, either raw, freshly picked, or cooked with gobs and gobs of butter on it. I just love it. Go ahead, Patricia.
Well, I'm looking forward to trying the peaches here because Georgia's known for its peaches, but we haven't really had many of them.
No.
And in fact, we're having difficulty finding organic produce here. But I enjoy corn and watermelon, especially in the summer.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
And next we have Vicky.
Sorry about that. I'm with Katie, Stone Fruit. It's a short season and oh boy, I really love it. But something I have to say about it is that we have an apricot tree, which every 10 years has a bunch of apricots, and it did this year. We also have a volunteer nectarine tree that has a ton of the best tasting nectarines in the universe. We also have squirrels and birds. And so I went out and I put netting around where I could, but not content with that. I also put those shiny ribbon things on the tree to keep the birds off. But then I saw the squirrels sitting there chomping away. So I looked it up, and what you do is you soak rags in chili powder and you hang it from the tree. So consequently, the tree now has netting all over the bottom. It has these shiny ribbons flying, and it has these, I took cat toy balls, covered them in fabric, and tied the bottom so that they look like ghosts, and soaked it in the cayenne pepper stew that I made. And it is a stew. I mean, I stewed it for half an hour. And I have them hanging from the branches. I will eat these nectarines. They are mine.
And next up we have Pat.
I like salads in the summer, and we like to go someplace to a good seafood place and have like crab louie, and then of course you have to have ice cream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, almost any flavor.
Very good. And here's Eddie Spaghetti, whose favorite food is not spaghetti in the summer, I've heard.
Well, I live in Davis, and we have this great farmers market, Cape Bay Valley, with all the great organic vegetables. And so I love all those things. But one thing that I really probably overrides all that is ceviche,
Mm.
fresh ceviche.
Mm.
What is that?
Ceviche is, well, I put it on a tostado and then it's shrimp and cilantro and onion, little tomato, and this is lime sauce. It's a Mexican dish.
It's all those things, or plain fish actually, marinated in lime. Generally not cooked, but marinated, cooked by marination.
Mm.
Mhm.
Karen, do you like ceviche?
Do I?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, I do.
okay.
But I would say I'm in Bremerton in Washington. I'm for the berries. I just really love all the different kinds of berries. Sadly, I also like them in pies and cobblers and all the different.
Nothing
Okay.
sad.
Did you say you're in Washington?
Yes,
Wow.
yes, I am. I'm looking out over Puget Sound even as we speak.
Nice.
Great that you can zoom into the swap. That's super.
I know. I'm so glad I didn't have to leave it.
Yeah, I went to Olympic College, Olympic Junior College.
Oh, it's right up the street from me.
Nice.
Are you visiting or are you living there?
No, I'm here for a while at least. So
Genevieve, it sounds like you know ceviche also. You were giving us the recipe, I think. What is your favorite summer food?
Muted.
You're muted.
you're muted.
It's changed a lot because I'm vegetarian now, but I think generally the stone fruit and any kind of fresh fruit I love. And fresh tomatoes, homegrown if possible. But I have to be like a storyteller. I have to say that prompted me to remember a wonderful memory and a great food, which was, we used to have what are called kermeses, which are bazaars, which are church fundraisers. And my uncle and his wife, my aunt and my uncle used to make gorditas. And I tell you, I think they used to have like about 5 gallons of lard sizzling in what looked like a steel drum from a band, and it would be bubbling and sizzling, and they would make the maíz, the corn tortilla batter stuff, dough, and you would make it in a round thing and put it in the sizzling oil until it got nice brown and crispy, and then you'd split it and put in some wonderful spiced meat and lettuce and tomato and drippy, greasy stuff, and so delicious.
Oh,
Kids running around all the churchyard just doing that and cracking confetti stuffed eggs on each other's heads.
oh my God. That's a nice image. Vina, what is your favorite summer food?
Well, it's those same stone fruits converted into a pie, or actually a series of pies. Once we've got an unlimited supply of apricots and then the succession is peaches, we just have pie after pie, which we make.
Yeah.
John chops up the fruit, I make the crust. It's a combined project.
Where are you, Vina?
Where?
Where are you?
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Pengrove, which is significant because that is where Fruit Group is to be found. So you get on their phone list, and every Thursday for like 8 Thursdays, you can purchase a box of apricots and then peaches.
It's called what? Fruit Group?
Fruit Group, yeah.
Ooh.
And it's really better than anything you can find in a supermarket because it ripens within just the beginning almost right away. So it hasn't been picked too green.
Wow. Very nice. That sounds great. Meg, what is your favorite summer food?
Well, no, you asked me this. I told you.
Meg's already
The vegetables.
Oh, that's right.
It's okay.
I'm
It's okay.
losing
But
it.
I'm sticking with vegetables, even
Are
after
you
hearing
sure?
about all these fruits. Oh my gosh.
I thought
I'm
maybe
sticking
you
with
changed your
vegetables.
mind.
And the
Almost.
lovely
It
town,
was tempting.
the lovely town of Forestville,
Yes.
my favorite place.
Thank you. Mine too.
Gay.
Okay. I'm in the watermelon group. I like, especially when it's cold after you put it in the refrigerator. Watermelon in the summertime is wonderful.
Mm,
Where do you live?
Actually, I'm in San Diego and I've been here for about a year. I actually live in Santa Rosa, but my son was in a life-threatening accident, motorcycle accident. So I've been here for about a year. Oh, just exactly a year, because it was at the end of June last year that the accident.
Wow. Oh,
So,
I'm sorry.
so I've been able to join you guys because of the Zoom
mm.
opportunity to be
Right.
together.
We're glad you're here.
Yeah.
Glad to
Thank
have
you. I'm glad to be a part of this. It's very wonderful to keep the continuity.
Yeah. And here we have John and Cher.
Let's see, what's your favorite food? Summertime.
I like corn on the cob and peaches.
Corn on the cob for me too. That was the first thing I thought of.
Yeah.
Watermelon's a close second, but we get watermelon very much. Thanks a lot to go get one.
Oh, we're in Bodega.
We're in Bodega.
It's foggy now.
Nice and cool out here.
Corn in the fog.
Yeah.
And here we have Deb.
Hi, I'm just chiming in with all the fruits and vegetables and foods everyone's mentioning, really. Food, I was just thinking about food today. It takes us places. And I think of a lot about places, but I'm just, I can't exactly explain summer food and fresh out of the ground, fresh produce, and how alive it just makes me feel to bite into a fresh champion tomato, homegrown tomato, if you ever have a chance to grow your own and you get that special brand. And then I have the foods, I can't focus on one. There's too many good memories. The thunderstorm in Canada and how we all ate fresh corn on the cob dipped in butter in the thunderstorm. Beautiful memory. You know, how these memories, but just nothing like the fresh earth giving us a big hug. You know, it's like nature gives you a big hug when it gives you fresh food. And from watermelon to nectarines and peaches, it's just a wonderful time. I'm glad we're talking about summer food.
And thank you for that. Val, can you turn your camera on?
I'm enjoying having our place in low lighting right now because of the heat. So if you guys don't mind talking to an invisible person.
That's fine.
I've heard a lot of my favorite summer foods mentioned, like fresh peaches and cold watermelon. One of the things that I really love in summer is picnics. So egg salad sandwiches and just, getting a fresh loaf of bread from bakery and then picking up something from the farmer's market and taking it somewhere. Summer is really nice for that.
Wonderful.
That does sound nice. Okay, maybe somebody can help me. Whom have I missed?
Kathy Small. Is Kathy still with us? She was a friend visiting.
I don't
Still here?
No.
The Foster on yet?
Oh, they went.
Did they?
They did.
Yeah, we did.
Oh, memorable. Thank you.
I do. Hi, Sean.
Wi-Fi went out when we missed it. Sorry.
Okay.
Short and sweet.
I think we
I
did everybody.
Yeah, I think we did, which is
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Well, it's nice to hear everyone's voice. That's one of the reasons we do that. And of course, there's stories and everything. There's always that kind of impetus to start telling a story, even if you're talking about a an ear of corn. So our next portion is announcements, and I heard somebody asking about the National Storytelling Network conference. And so if you go to storynet.org, and I can certainly put this in the chat, I'll copy it right now. I believe somebody already added it to the chat, but there is a conference next week. You can pay per workshop or event, or you can buy a pass to the whole conference. There is a special COVID rate this year. You can do the whole conference for $150, and that is almost 5 days worth of panels and workshops and keynote speakers and all kinds of things. There is a full schedule for each of the days. I know Wednesday is rather limited, so let's start with Thursday. You can just see all the incredible things. There are workshops like Rock the Zoom Story Aerobics, and then there's panel discussions, and I am a part of this one, the Stories in Living Color, a project of SAC. And some of you have attended the Stories in Living Color events that we've had. This will be a panel discussing what inspired it, what we've learned so far, and where we're headed. There is a keynote presentation by Kristen Piedamonte, and there's showcases, all kinds of great things on all of these days. Here's Friday, more showcases and workshops, and Saturday, the same thing. If you want to register, you can do the full conference, as I said, there's a COVID rate, or as I also said, you can do individual events. You can see what that's like. You would just choose one of the things you want to do and add it to your bill, and it will just add up what you've selected instead of doing the whole conference. So all of that is available at storynet.org. And like I said, I believe someone put that in the chat already, but I might as well throw it in there again. So here is that website right there, and you can register, and they send you the links to all the different things, I believe, as they become available right before they're about to start. It is virtual. Are there other announcements? I imagine Katie and Meg probably have some things they would like to say, and then we'll open it up to other things that are going on around the state and in Washington and in Georgia. And I know San Diego was mentioned. We're not just in Sonoma County right now. So Katie, do you have something you'd like to share?
Before you leave the subject, I was just wondering, do you know whether it's going to be recorded so that if you can't access all of the events, you can access them later, like some conferences are doing?
Yes, I believe it is. I'm pretty sure it is. That then those are all available to you afterward.
Thanks.
Brandon, Meg and I don't have any
Okay.
announcements. Thank
Great.
you very much.
Sure. And so what about Ed? He's always got something. You kind of did your announcement, though. You have your
I
event.
did. Yeah, we have the genre storytelling, humorous stories on July 21st through the Storytelling Association of California, and the local group I'm involved with, the Sacramento Storytellers Guild. We're doing our first in-person event, although we're going to hybrid. We're going to do Zoom also. So we just bought a projector. We're going to mess around with it this next week. It will be July 24th on a Saturday at 2 o'clock. And we're going to do it at the Poetry Center in Sacramento. So we're teaming up with them now, and we're going to have 6 storytellers and 2 poets that have 5 minutes each. So we wanted to do a nice joint venture. They give us the free space and there's parking and all that. So it'd be fun. And that's at Storytelling Association of California too. All these story swaps, yours, all of them are listed. So you can, you go to SAC, you can see everything, many opportunities. And it's only $30 a year for membership. So it's a great deal.
Thank you.
And it's important to support your storytelling organizations who are supporting us as storytellers. Yeah,
That's a good point, Elaine. Thank you.
it's true. Yeah.
So,
Well, I have a story.
wonderful. I was
I
The
was
next
going to tell it, but I told Katie yesterday or something that I would tell one. I don't have it timed though. It's not real long, but it's not real short. I don't know.
That's great. You have 28 minutes.
It'll be faster than that. Okay. There was a young man who was very skilled at his trade. And he was self-taught, mostly self-taught. And his skill required that he be very fast and quick with his hands, light of touch, and almost like a wisp of wind. For you see, his profession was a pickpocket. Now, he wasn't just your everyday run-of-the-mill kind of pickpocket, for he didn't believe in picking the pockets of people who might go hungry if he picked their pockets. He only picked on people who wore fancy clothing, had walked out of fancy restaurants and buildings where they obviously had plenty of money and wouldn't miss a pocket picked here or there. One day he came home, he dumped his night's earnings out on the table and he began to add up his pay for the day and realized, why had he not thought of going to the big city? I mean, he lived in a moderately small town. They rolled up the sidewalks at 9 o'clock. His pickpocketing had to go all day if he wanted to make any money. And so he decided it was time to go to the big city and really make a fortune. So the next day he took off for the city. And sure enough, there people met night and day. They were out in the streets all the time. There was always a group of people around that he could walk through and make some money. And one Sunday he was working a really big crowd of people. And he noticed a young lady across the way. She was really attractive, and he was quite attracted to her. He was smitten by her, and so he walked over and he engaged her in conversation. It was a short, very innocuous kind of conversation, but as she walked away and he went his way, he realized she had picked his pockets. And so he went back through the crowds looking for her, going through the crowds. Where could she be? And then he found her and he pulled her aside and he said, you know, you're very good. You and I, we work in the same profession. She said, yes, I know. And he said, what do you say we team up and do this as a team? She said, well, I could think about it. He goes, oh, we'd make a great team. You and I, it would be fun. Let's at least give it a try. She said, well, all right, we'll give it a try. Well, it wasn't long before they were living together in a big fancy house up on the hill, like many of the people whose pockets they picked. And they were making money hand over fist. They were getting rich. And one morning, as they were waking up and getting ready to start their day, she said, you know, it would be pretty nice if we had some children. And he said, children? Well, we'd have to feed and take and dress and your genes and my genes and ooh, maybe that's a good idea. We could become the richest people in all the world. And she said, well, I'm glad you like the idea. And so they set about to have a child. Well, it didn't take long before she was quite large with child. And they still were working the crowds and still bringing in the money like crazy. And then they lined up the doctors and the midwives and got all ready for this fabulous birth that was to take place. And she went into labor. And sure enough, out came a beautiful baby girl. He was a little disappointed at first. A girl? And she said, yes, a beautiful girl. And he goes, yes, like her mother. And so they started to raise the baby. But there was one small problem. From the very second that child was born, her right fist was in a tight ball and her arm locked across her chest. And the baby never moved that arm. Well, a day went by, 2 days went by, the baby kicked and the baby cooed and the baby slept quite a bit and suckled at her mother's breast. But she never moved that fist or that arm, which was locked across her chest. And he could not believe it. He says, this is ridiculous. There's something wrong with this baby. They move everything and she hasn't. And so he quickly wrapped the baby up and took her to a doctor. The doctor examined the child from head to toe and toe to head, inside and out and outside and in. And then he said, you know, she's a beautiful baby. He goes, yeah, I know, but what's wrong with that arm? It's just locked across her chest as if it was never supposed to move. And the doctor felt around and looked at it and he goes, she's a newborn baby. You can't expect a child to be dexterous with all their movements at this point. He goes, well, I am a new father. He goes, yes, of course. The child is fine. Take her home. So 3 more days pass. The child is kicking and cooing and having a good time, but never, not asleep, not awake, never did that right fist in that tight ball and that arm across the chest ever move. So the guy wraps the baby up again and takes her back to the doctor and he says, look, I don't know about babies, it's true, but there's something wrong with this child's arm. That's her right arm. I'm sure she's right-handed. Her mother is, I am. And it's important that she be able to move all her body parts. There is something wrong when a child doesn't move their arm like that. The doctor took her in the back, examined her again, took an x-ray and said, no, this child is perfectly healthy and she just has a mind of her own and she's not going to move that arm till she's ready to move that arm. Take her home. And he started out the door and said, this is ridiculous. I don't have to put up with this. We're rich. We could go to the best specialists in all the world. And so we shall. And so he looked around and researched and found that some of the best doctors in the world lived not far from where they did. So they took a trip over to where these doctors were and he brought the child in and he said, please tell us what's wrong with this child. For that fist and arm has never moved since the child was born. And the doctors took her in the back and they examined her from head to toe and toe to head, inside and out and outside and in. And they brought her out and said, we think she's perfectly fine. Wait, she is fine, but there is one more test we could do. And so he took this baby, 6 days old, and put her on a little chair. And she was wrapped up, not tight, but wrapped up partially to stay warm. And the doctor reached into his coat and produced a gold watch, which he began to swing in front of the child's face. And as the watch went back and forth, the child's eyes locked onto that watch and watched that watch move back and forth, back and forth. The doctors were amazed. Their jaws fell on the floor. They were like, oh, look at this. She's only 6 days old. Look at how she can focus and concentrate and follow that movement of that watch. That is absolutely amazing. And the child sitting there with her arm across her chest, her fist in a tight ball, watched and tracked that watch. Well, the doctors were so amazed. As he swung the watch, they turned to look at their parents' face to see how marvelous this was that a 60-year-old child could do this. And as the doctor looked away, the child's arm flew from her chest, and as she opened her fist to grab for the gold watch, out rolled the ring of the midwife across the floor.
Oh.
Oh, what a hoot.
Oh my goodness. That's what was in there.
Yep.
Oh, Elaine, thank you.
What skill this guy?
Hey, Elaine, where did you hear that story? I've heard that
Oh.
story.
Many, many years ago. It was one of the first stories I used to tell.
Oh, fun. Yeah, I took a class. I took a class from Bob Jenkins, and he had that down at San Diego State, and he had that story in the class, and a lot of us learned it. It was a lot of fun. It's a great story.
It's a fun story to tell, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Ed, thank you for your, what do you call that? It's not a tall tale. It's just kind of, what do you call a story like that where, you know, you take people on, it's a wild ride. That's what it is.
A
You take
wild ride, yeah.
people on a wild ride.
Yeah.
And I also want to thank Vicky for her incredible story with fantasy and realism and beautiful descriptions. And I want to thank Sharon
Yeah.
for her story about that incredible mind at the end of its life and that delicate balance between brilliance and, I guess you would say, dementia, right? I want to thank, let's see, who else did we have? We had
Yeah.
Pat with the kindergarten.
Yeah, where is Pat?
Right there.
There you are. Thank you.
Yeah.
Pat, thank you for your story. And of
Genevieve
course,
for-
I wouldn't have been able to do piano and singing. I'd probably have to try to get away with the washboard or something if I were a teacher in those days. And we have everybody up here. Ed, Sharon. Yes.
Genevieve.
And Genevieve.
Genevieve for her therapy dog story. Yeah.
Very good. Thank all the tellers. You really, really took us to very special places, very different places tonight. And it was a wonderful swap. I look forward to seeing everybody again in a month. I want to thank, as always, Katie Mangan and Meg Brown, who are the organizers. And I just continue to like thanking Elaine and Ken Foster for founding this swap, because it's one of the best things in my life. So I really appreciate it.
Well, we love having you be part of our swap for sure.
Yeah.
Yes, agreed.
Thank you, Brandon, for hosting.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well,
it's such an honor. So I will see everybody
Can I just
in the
say,
second week.
Brandon?
Yeah, is there?
Yeah, sorry, Brandon, thank you. I want to say thank you so much to you. I also want to say thank you so much to Meg, who just has got an awful lot going on and still comes through. It's just wonderful. And Genevieve, for your story, it was just off the chart. Deep gratitude and thanks. And for all the tellers, another wonderful evening. Thank you, Brandon. So much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Be well.
All right.
Till soon, God willing.
Yes.